Alex Royce sat in the back of his sleek, black limousine, staring out the window as the city's skyline blurred by. The tall buildings loomed over the bustling streets, a reflection of the life he had built. From nothing to everything, a journey that had defined his existence. Yet for all the wealth, power, and success, Alex felt hollow. His reflection in the window, perfectly polished like the world he now lived in, only reminded him of the many failed attempts at finding genuine love. Another blind date tonight, huh? Max, his ever-faithful chauffeur, glanced at him in the rear-view mirror. His tone carried the hint of sarcasm that years of loyalty allowed. Max knew the routine all too well. Fancy dinners, superficial conversations, and another woman enthralled by the idea of being with a millionaire. Nothing more, nothing less. Yeah, another one, Alex muttered, his voice laced with exhaustion. What's her name again? Eliza, someone you were set up with, by a mutual friend. Supposed to be different, Max added, as if repeating the words he'd heard 100 times before. Alex sighed. They were all supposed to be different, but every time, the same pattern played out. Once the women learned of his wealth, it was all about his lifestyle, not him. The real Alex, if there even was one left, seemed invisible behind the layer of money and status. He looked down at his designer suit, feeling a growing disconnect between himself and the man he'd become. You know, Max began, his voice breaking the silence, you could switch things up. Just for tonight. Go in without all the bells and whistles. Alex raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? I'm saying, show her something real. Something you don't usually show on these dates, Max said, tapping the wheel lightly. Hell, you could even pretend to be me. See what happens when you're not the Alex Royce, millionaire playboy. See if she's really different. Alex chuckled, though the idea intrigued him. It was absurd, really, pretending to be his own chauffeur. But the thought lingered. What if, for once, someone saw him as just another guy? Not the man with the mansion, the cars, and the business empire. Just Alex. And what if she walks out the minute she realizes I'm not the guy she's expecting? Alex asked. Max smirked. Then maybe she's just like all the others. Alex leaned back in his seat, the temptation growing stronger by the second. He was tired of playing the same game and getting the same results. Maybe Max was right. What did he have to lose? All right, Alex said after a long pause. Let's do it. The restaurant was one of the most exclusive in the city. All modern glass and ambient lighting. The kind of place where millionaires met for expensive meals they barely touched. Alex, however, sat nervously in a limousine, dressed not in his usual custom-tailored suit, but in one of Max's spare uniforms, worn but neat. The irony was palpable. For the first time in years, Alex felt out of place. The rich, high-end clientele brushed past him, their eyes skimming over him without a second thought. He wasn't one of them tonight. He was just another driver, waiting outside the restaurant. Max, now dressed in one of Alex's finest suits, sat beside him in the driver's seat. You ready for this? Max asked, flashing a grin that was a mix of amusement and genuine concern. Not really, Alex admitted, his fingers tapping nervously against his thigh. But I guess it's too late to back out now. Max laughed, shaking his head. Relax. You'll be fine. Just act natural. Alex forced a smile and glanced at the time. Eliza was set to arrive any minute. His heart raced, a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. It had been a long time since he'd been anything other than the Alex Royce everyone expected. Tonight, he was just Alex, an ordinary guy. A sleek, silver car pulled up, and out stepped Eliza. She was as beautiful as the photos he had been shown, a woman in her early 30s, with an air of confidence that didn't rely on flashy clothes or excessive makeup. She looked simple yet elegant, and for the first time in a long while, Alex felt genuine curiosity rather than skepticism. Eliza approached, her eyes scanning the area, clearly looking for the man she had been set up with. Alex swallowed his nerves and stepped forward. Eliza, he called out, his voice catching in his throat. She turned to him, her expression polite but puzzled. Yes, I'm Alex, he stammered. Mr. Royce, he's running a bit late. He sent me, his driver, to keep you company until he arrives." Eliza blinked, her brows furrowing slightly in confusion. But to Alex's surprise, she didn't seem put off. Instead, she smiled, warm and genuine. "Oh," she said with a small laugh, "that's unexpected, but all right. I don't mind waiting. It's been a long day, and honestly, I'm not in a rush." Relief washed over Alex as he gestured toward a nearby bench outside the restaurant. "Would you like to sit while we wait? Maybe talk?" Eliza smiled again and nodded. As they sat down, the din of the city provided a background hum. For the first time in years, Alex felt like he wasn't being judged for his money or status. He was just a man having a conversation, and the sense of freedom was intoxicating. They talked about her day, about the city, about life in general. Eliza had a natural charm, a way of making mundane things seem interesting. She spoke about her work and education, her love for helping children, and the struggles she faced in a world where money often dictated success. Alex found himself completely absorbed in her words, in her perspective. For the first time in years, he felt a genuine connection, untainted by wealth or expectations. And yet, the longer the conversation went on, the heavier the lie weighed on his chest. As the evening wore on, the conversation between Alex and Eliza flowed effortlessly. The air was crisp with the scent of the city, a mix of car exhaust, street food, and something unnameable that was distinctly urban. The hum of distant conversations and the clinking of glasses from the restaurant behind them filled the silence between their words, yet neither seemed in a hurry to end the evening. Eliza had a way of making the simplest moments feel meaningful. She spoke passionately about her work as a teacher, her eyes lighting up when she described the children in her class. Alex listened intently, genuinely interested, but also increasingly burdened by the fact that she had no idea who he really was. In all his years of dating, never had Alex felt such a connection with someone. He had grown accustomed to being admired for his wealth, his achievements, and his lifestyle. But Eliza seemed to care about none of that. She was talking to him, the man she believed to be a simple chauffeur, and she was still interested. In fact, she seemed intrigued by his supposed modest life. And that terrified Alex more than anything. "How long have you been driving for Mr. Royce?" Eliza asked, sipping from her glass of water. Alex hesitated, momentarily caught off guard. "A few years now," he lied smoothly. "He's a good boss." Eliza smiled. "It must be interesting, driving someone like him around. I imagine you get a glimpse into his world." Alex gave a non-committal nod, the irony of the situation pressing down on him. "Yeah, I guess you could say that." Eliza leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "You know, I've always wondered what it must be like to have that kind of wealth. To be able to buy anything you want, go anywhere. But I've also wondered if it makes people happy. Really happy." Alex froze at her words, his mind racing. Did wealth really bring happiness? He had asked himself the same question countless times, especially in recent years as his relationships crumbled under the weight of superficiality. He was wealthy beyond his wildest dreams, yet sitting here with Eliza, pretending to be someone else, was the first time he'd felt content in a long time. Honestly, Alex began slowly, choosing his words carefully. "I think it depends on what you value. Money can give you a lot of things, but it can't give you the stuff that really matters." Eliza looked at him for a moment, her eyes searching his face as if she was trying to read something deeper in his words. She smiled again, this time softer. "I think you're right. It's refreshing to hear that." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the cars pass by on the busy street. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of his deception growing heavier with every minute. He hadn't planned on liking her this much, hadn't anticipated how real this connection would feel. And yet, the longer the conversation went on, the harder it became to imagine telling her the truth. "What about you?" Eliza asked suddenly, turning to face him. "Is this what you always wanted to do? Drive people around?" The question hit Alex like a punch to the gut. He blinked, his mind scrambling for a response. "Well, Before he could answer, Max appeared from the shadows, dressed in Alex's expensive suit, looking every bit the millionaire. "Excuse me, miss," he said smoothly, his voice deep with a practiced authority. "Mr. Royce has arrived." Eliza blinked, momentarily thrown off. But then she smiled and stood up, extending her hand to Max. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Royce." Max shot Alex a quick glance, a knowing look passing between them before he took Eliza's hand and kissed it lightly. "The pleasure is all mine." Alex's stomach twisted in knots as he watched the charade play out. He had wanted more time with Eliza, more time to figure out how he really felt, to understand what he should do next. But now, the moment had come. The plan was in motion, and it was too late to back out. Max played the role of Alex Royce flawlessly, as if born for the part. He exuded charm and confidence, and while Eliza seemed charmed by his smooth demeanor, she hadn't connected with him the way she had with the driver. Alex watched from the sidelines, his emotions a tangled mess. He should have been relieved that his secret was still intact, but instead, he felt an unexpected pang of jealousy as Max interacted with Eliza. "So tell me, Mr. Royce," Eliza began, still politely engaged in conversation, "what is it like to live such an extraordinary life?" Max chuckled, but Alex could hear the discomfort in his voice. "It has its perks, of course, but I imagine it's not all that different from anyone else's life. We all have our struggles, our joys." Eliza smiled, but Alex noticed something, a subtle shift in her expression. She wasn't entirely buying it. He could see the gears turning in her mind, as if she was trying to reconcile the charming man before her with the one she had just spent hours talking to outside the restaurant. Alex's phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking his thoughts. He stepped away from the scene and glanced at the screen. A message from Max. "You're gonna have to tell her eventually, you know." Alex clenched his jaw. Max was right. The lie had already gone too far, but he wasn't ready to face the consequences just yet. Not when everything felt so fragile. He shoved the phone back in his pocket and took a deep breath. Eliza and Max continued their conversation, but Alex's mind was miles away. The connection he had felt with Eliza, the authenticity, the ease, was slipping through his fingers. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever, but the thought of losing her because of his deception filled him with dread. Finally, the dinner came to an end. Max excused himself to take care of business, leaving Eliza and Alex alone once again. As they walked toward her car, Eliza turned to him with a thoughtful look on her face. "You know," she said slowly, "I had a really good time tonight, and not just with Mr. Royce." She paused, her eyes locking with his. "You're different. I don't know what it is, but I feel like I've known you longer than just a few hours." Alex's heart raced. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. He was stuck, trapped between the truth and the lie. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly, standing close to him now. "I hope we can talk again soon." With that, Eliza stepped into her car and drove off into the night, leaving Alex standing there, the weight of his deception heavier than ever. Over the next few days, Alex found himself juggling two identities: his real self, the millionaire businessman, and the role he played for Eliza, the humble chauffeur. Each time he met with her, the weight of his deception grew heavier, but the thought of telling her the truth seemed even more impossible. The connection they had felt so genuine, so real, that the idea of shattering it terrified him. Eliza continued to reach out, asking about his life as a driver, the places he'd seen, the people he'd met. Alex responded carefully, sticking to the fabricated story he had created. Each lie felt like a betrayal, but he couldn't bring himself to stop. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen, not as Alex Royce, the millionaire, but as just Alex. The world of wealth and luxury seemed like a distant memory when he was with her. Instead of extravagant dates in five-star restaurants, they spent time in small cafes, walked through city parks, and talked for hours about life, dreams, and regrets. And with every passing day, Alex fell deeper. But with each meeting, Max's warnings echoed in his mind. "You're going to have to tell her eventually," he had said. Alex knew it was true, but he kept pushing it aside, hoping for more time. Yet, with each passing day, the lie took root deeper, and Alex began to fear that revealing the truth would cost him everything. One evening, after one of their long walks, Alex and Eliza sat on a park bench overlooking the river. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting the water in a soft orange glow. Eliza leaned back, her hand resting lightly on Alex's. He froze for a moment, unsure of what to do, before gently intertwining his fingers with hers. It felt natural, easy. "You know," Eliza began, her voice soft and thoughtful, "I've never felt this comfortable with someone so quickly. It's strange, but I feel like I've known you for a lot longer than I have." Alex's stomach twisted with guilt. She had no idea who he really was, and yet she felt close to him, closer than she'd ever been with anyone. He wanted to tell her the truth, to lay everything bare, but every time the thought crossed his mind, the fear of losing her held him back. Instead, he smiled weakly and squeezed her hand. "I feel the same way." They sat in silence for a while, the distant sounds of the city filling the air. But the longer they sat there, the more Alex's thoughts swirled. How long could he keep this up? The closer they got, the harder it would be to come clean. Finally, Eliza broke the silence. "I have to admit, when I first met you, I thought you were going to be like all the others. Superficial, materialistic. But you're different." Her words struck Alex like a physical blow. She was falling for the version of him that didn't exist, the version he had created to escape the superficiality of his real life. And now, the thought of telling her the truth felt like a betrayal of everything they had built. He wanted to believe that she could love him for who he really was, but the risk of losing her loomed too large. For now, all he could do was continue playing the role, even if it meant losing himself in the process. Alex's double life became even more complicated when an unexpected player entered the picture, a wealthy suitor named Brandon Hartman, a fellow businessman who had taken an interest in Eliza. Unlike Alex, Brandon made no effort to hide his wealth. He flaunted it at every opportunity, showering Eliza with expensive gifts and invitations to exclusive events. Alex, pretending to be a simple chauffeur, watched helplessly from the sidelines as Brandon made his moves. Every time he saw Eliza with Brandon, a knot of jealousy twisted in his chest. Brandon was everything Alex had tried so hard not to be: flashy, arrogant, and focused on materialism. And yet, Eliza seemed to be considering his advances, albeit reluctantly. One evening, after dropping Eliza off at her apartment, Alex watched from the driver's seat as Brandon arrived in a sleek, red sports car. He stepped out with his usual air of confidence, flashing a charming smile as he greeted Eliza. Alex's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he watched them talk, his mind racing. Was Eliza falling for Brandon? Was the very thing he had feared coming true? The conversation between Eliza and Brandon appeared civil, but Alex could sense the tension. Eliza was polite, but distant, her body language clearly signaling discomfort. And yet, there was a part of Alex that feared she might eventually be swayed by Brandon's wealth and charm. Later that night, Max, ever the observer, commented on the situation. "You're going to have to step up, man. If you don't, someone like Brandon is going to swoop in and take her from you." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know. I don't know how to do that without telling her the truth." Max raised an eyebrow. "Maybe it's time you did." Alex's heart pounded. The thought of revealing his true identity to Eliza had plagued him for weeks. But now, with Brandon in the picture, the stakes were higher than ever. If he didn't act soon, he could lose her to someone who only saw her as another accessory to his lifestyle. The following evening, Alex and Eliza met at a small cafe, one of the many places they frequented, far from the glitz and glamour of the world Alex actually belonged to. As they sipped their coffees, Alex noticed Eliza's mood was subdued. She seemed distracted, her mind elsewhere. "Is everything okay?" Alex asked, his voice laced with concern. Eliza sighed, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "It's Brandon. He's been very persistent." Alex's heart sank. "Are you interested in him?" Eliza looked up, her eyes meeting his. "No, not really. He's not the kind of person I want to be with." But he doesn't seem to get that. Relief flooded through Alex, but it was quickly followed by guilt. Eliza didn't want to be with someone like Brandon, a man who flaunted his wealth and status. And yet, That was exactly who Alex was. He was no different, except that he had hidden it from her. "I'm glad to hear that," Alex said quietly, though his mind was still racing. How much longer could he keep this up before everything came crashing down? It happened faster than Alex could have imagined. A slip of the tongue, a moment of carelessness, and suddenly, his entire charade came crashing down. Alex had agreed to meet Eliza at the park once again, their favorite spot by the river where they could escape the chaos of the city. But that day, Alex had been distracted. His mind was occupied with a high-stakes business deal, and despite his best efforts to keep his two worlds separate, they had begun to bleed together. As they strolled along the riverbank, their conversation flowing as easily as it always had, Eliza asked about his work as a driver. "You must see so many different kinds of people, driving for someone like Mr. Royce." Alex nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I guess you could say that." Eliza laughed. "I bet you have some stories to tell. Maybe one day you can introduce me to him." "Mr. Royce, I mean..." The words caught Alex off guard, and before he could stop himself, he said, "You already have." Eliza stopped walking, her brow furrowed in confusion as she turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Realizing what he had just said, Alex's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced, trying to come up with an excuse, a way to walk back the words. But it was too late. The look in Eliza's eyes told him she had already pieced it together. "You're Mr. Royce," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The silence that followed was deafening. Alex opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He had wanted to tell her the truth, but not like this. Not in a moment of weakness. Now everything he had worked so hard to protect was falling apart. Eliza stepped back, her expression a mixture of shock and hurt. "All this time, you've been lying to me?" Alex tried to explain, but the words sounded hollow even to him. "I didn't mean to lie. I wanted to see if you'd like me for me, not for my money." Eliza's eyes filled with anger. "So, you pretended to be someone else. You tricked me into thinking you were just a normal guy, when all along you're the millionaire I was supposed to meet on that first night." Alex's throat tightened. "It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that." Eliza's voice cracked, her hurt turning into something sharper. "You lied to me, Alex. You let me believe something that wasn't true. I thought we had something real." Alex's chest tightened, the weight of his deception crashing down on him. "Eliza, please. It was real. I didn't want you to fall for the version of me that everyone else does. I wanted you to know the real me." Eliza shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "But you didn't give me a choice. You never gave me the chance to know the real you because you never trusted me enough to be honest." The words hit Alex like a physical blow. She was right. He hadn't trusted her. He had let his fear of rejection, his insecurities about his wealth, cloud his judgment. And now, the very thing he had tried to protect, his connection with Eliza, was slipping through his fingers. Without another word, Eliza turned and walked away, leaving Alex standing alone by the river, the weight of his choices heavy on his shoulders. The days following the revelation were some of the longest Alex had ever experienced. The emptiness that had always lingered in the back of his mind now consumed him entirely. He had lost her, not because of a lie itself, but because he hadn't trusted her enough to tell her the truth. And that realization was the hardest to bear. Max tried to console him, but Alex was inconsolable. "I warned you, man," Max said one evening as they sat in Alex's penthouse. "I told you this would happen." Alex didn't respond. He simply stared out the window, the city lights below him blurring together into a sea of brightness. None of it mattered anymore. The wealth, the success, it all felt meaningless without Eliza. "You still have a chance, you know," Max continued, his tone softening. "You could go to her, explain everything. She's hurt, but if she felt the same way about you as you do about her, there's still a shot." Alex shook his head. "I can't. I've already destroyed her trust. How am I supposed to fix that?" Max shrugged. "People make mistakes, but if you care about her as much as you say you do, you'll try. And maybe she'll see that you're being genuine this time." Alex knew Max was right, but the thought of facing Eliza again, of seeing the hurt in her eyes, terrified him. He had built his life around control, controlling his business, his image, his relationships. But with Eliza, he had lost control. He had let his fear dictate his actions, and now he was paying the price. After several sleepless nights, Alex made a decision. He couldn't let things end like this, not without trying to make amends. Whether or not Eliza forgave him was out of his hands, but he had to face her, to apologize for the deception and the pain he had caused. It took another day for Alex to muster the courage to contact her. He sent a simple message asking if they could meet. Hours passed with no response, and just when Alex had given up hope, his phone buzzed. It was Eliza. Her reply was short, but it gave Alex the sliver of hope he needed. "We can talk." They agreed to meet at the same cafe where they had spent so many evenings together. Alex arrived early, nerves twisting in his stomach as he waited. When Eliza walked through the door, he felt a jolt of both relief and anxiety. She looked the same, beautiful, confident, but there was a distance in her eyes that hadn't been there before. They sat in silence for a few moments, neither of them knowing where to begin. Finally, Alex spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry for lying to you, for not trusting you enough to tell you the truth. I know I hurt you, and I hate that I did." Eliza didn't respond right away. She simply watched him, her expression unreadable. "I didn't mean to deceive you," Alex continued. I didn't know how else to see if what we had was real. I've spent so long being defined by my wealth, by what I have, that I didn't think you'd ever see me for who I really am. But that doesn't excuse what I did." Eliza finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "You didn't give me the chance to decide for myself. You took that choice away from me." Alex nodded, his throat tight. "I know, and I hate that I did that." The silence stretched between them, heavy and painful. Alex waited, his heart pounding, for Eliza to say something, anything. Finally, she sighed and leaned back in her chair. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she admitted, her eyes meeting his. "You hurt me, Alex. And it wasn't just a lie. It was the fact that you didn't trust me enough to be honest." Alex felt a lump form in his throat. "I know, and I'll spend as long as it takes proving to you that you can trust me again, if you're willing to give me that chance." Eliza looked away, her expression conflicted. "I need time." Alex nodded. "I understand. Take as much time as you need. I'll be here." With that, their conversation ended. Eliza stood, giving him one last look before she walked away. This time, however, Alex knew the door wasn't completely closed. There was still a chance, however small, that they could rebuild what they had lost. Time seemed to crawl in the days following their conversation at the cafe. Alex gave Eliza the space she needed, but each passing day without hearing from her felt like an eternity. He tried to focus on his business, his meetings, his empire, but nothing seemed to matter. All he could think about was whether he had ruined everything with the one person who had made him feel real again. Max, always the voice of reason, tried to keep Alex grounded. "You've done what you can," Max said one evening as they drove through the city. "Now it's up to her. But if she does come back, you need to make sure you're ready." Alex nodded, though the uncertainty gnawed at him. What if she never came back? What if he had lost her for good? He had already made the biggest mistake of his life by lying to her, and now he had to live with the possibility that it was too late to fix it. Several more days passed before Eliza reached out again. The message was brief. "Let's meet at the park tomorrow afternoon." Alex's heart raced as he read the words. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. He didn't know what she was going to say, but whatever it was, he had to face it head on. The next afternoon, Alex arrived at the park early. The same spot by the river where they had spent so many evenings talking and laughing now felt heavy with uncertainty. He stood there, hands in his pockets, watching the water ripple softly in the breeze, his mind replaying every moment they had shared. When Eliza arrived, she walked toward him slowly, her expression unreadable. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as she approached, and for a moment, he wondered if she had come to say goodbye for good. But when she finally spoke, her voice was calm, though tinged with sadness. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began, her eyes meeting his. About everything that's happened. About you. About us. Alex nodded, not trusting himself to speak just yet. Eliza sighed, crossing her arms as she continued. What you did hurt me. A lot. And it's going to take time for me to trust you again. If I can. But I also can't ignore what we had before the lie. That connection was real, even if the circumstances weren't. Alex's heart swelled with hope, but he remained silent, letting her speak. I've thought about walking away, Eliza admitted, her voice quiet. But something keeps pulling me back. Maybe it's because, deep down, I know that what we had wasn't just based on lies. There was something real between us, and I think it's worth fighting for. But things can't go back to the way they were, Alex. Not right away. If we're going to try this again, it has to be built on trust, complete honesty. Alex felt a surge of emotion, his chest tightening as he processed her words. She wasn't walking away. She was giving him a chance he thought he had lost forever. I know, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. And I promise you, from now on, there will be no more lies. No more pretending. You'll get all of me, the real me. I don't care about the money or the lifestyle or any of it. I just care about you. Eliza watched him for a moment, her expression softening. I want to believe that, Alex. I really do. But actions speak louder than words. It's going to take time to rebuild that trust. I'll wait as long as it takes, Alex said firmly. I'll do whatever it takes to show you that I'm serious. You're the only thing that matters to me. Eliza nodded slowly, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her lips. Then I guess we'll see where this goes. For the first time, in what felt like forever, Alex felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. The weeks that followed were slow, cautious steps toward rebuilding what had been broken. Eliza was guarded, but she didn't push Alex away. They met regularly, not at the exclusive restaurants or glamorous locations that had defined Alex's past relationships, but at the small cafes and parks where they had first connected. Each meeting felt like a delicate dance. Alex was careful, always mindful of his words and actions, determined to prove to Eliza that he was serious about changing. He didn't try to rush things or push her for more than she was ready to give. Instead, he focused on rebuilding her trust, one conversation at a time. Eliza, for her part, was cautious but not closed off. She listened when Alex spoke about his life, his real life, not the one he had hidden from her. She asked questions, tested his honesty, and slowly began to let her guard down again. But there was always a lingering tension between them, a reminder of the hurt that had come between them. One afternoon, as they sat together on a park bench, Eliza turned to him with a thoughtful expression. I've been thinking, she began, her tone hesitant, about trust. Alex tensed, unsure of where the conversation was heading. I know you're trying, Eliza continued, and I appreciate that. But trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. It's something that takes time, and I don't want to rush it. I want to take things slow and see where they go. Alex nodded, his heart heavy but understanding. I know. I'm not expecting things to go back to the way they were. I just want the chance to show you that I'm serious. Eliza smiled faintly. And you are. I can see that. But I also need to know that this isn't just about fixing what went wrong. I need to know that you're willing to build something new, something better. Alex met her gaze, his voice steady. I am. I want something real with you, Eliza. Something that isn't based on lies or appearances. I want to build something that lasts. For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of his words hanging between them. Then, slowly, Eliza reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. I'm willing to try, she said softly, but it's going to take time. Alex felt a surge of emotion, relief flooding through him. He had been given a second chance, a real one this time, and he wasn't going to waste it. From that moment on, things between them began to shift. Slowly but surely, the distance between them started to close. Eliza's walls began to come down, and Alex felt himself growing closer to her in ways he hadn't before. The lie that had once separated them now served as a reminder of how much they both had to lose if they didn't nurture the trust they were rebuilding. As the weeks turned into months, Alex and Eliza found themselves in a new place. Not the fairy tale romance they had once envisioned, but something real, something grounded. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that was all either of them had ever wanted. They didn't rush to label what they had. Instead, they focused on enjoying the time they spent together, letting their relationship grow at its own pace. And as they walked through the park hand in hand one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, Alex knew that this quiet, honest connection was worth more than all the wealth in the world. He had found what he had been searching for all along, not in the glitz and glamour of his life as a millionaire, but in the quiet moments spent with someone who saw him for who he truly was. And for the first time in years, Alex felt truly content. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like to support more content like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What moment in the Chauffeur's Gamble had the most impact on you? Let us know in the comments. Also, we want to create stories that you enjoy. So if you have any suggestions or ideas for future stories, feel free to drop them in the comments too. Your input means the world to us and helps shape the content on this channel. Thanks for being part of our storytelling journey.